because in studio we are joined not only by reporter extraordinaire Alex Littlehales, who is next to me and has been handling a lot of our political coverage and doing a stupendous job, but Chaz Nuttycombe, the executive director of State Navigate, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, also joins us here in studio. Chaz, thank you so much for taking time to do this. And just how are you today? How's everything?
I'm doing great. Good to be in Hampton Roads. Thank you for having me.
And can we just start by giving us a brief summary of what you do at State Navigate and what State Navigate is all about?
Sure. So State Navigate is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization based in Virginia. We are also open up shop in West Virginia and Wisconsin, Utah, and South Carolina. I've been predicting state legislative elections for 8 years now, and we curate and create data on state legislatures. So, for example, if you want to find out who your elected official is taking money from, you can go to our website and find that out. If you want to find out what is the odds that my delegate or governor or whatever is going to win this election or re-election, you can go ahead to our site and find that out. If you want to find the demographics of the district you're in, you can find that out. News going on around the Commonwealth or in whatever state you're in that we're open up shop in, you can find that out. So really, if you want to find out anything on state government, you go to State Navigate. I wouldn't really say that we're a website for state legislatures. I would say that we're the website for state legislatures.
Very good. And if you guys want to follow along at home, if you want to kind of engage with some of this material while we talk to Chaz, statenavigate.org, correct? Yep. So you can hop on that website right now and dig into some of the different numbers and narratives that we're going to be talking about here. And with that, I would love to pass it over to Alex Littlehales.
Well, I just wanted to also, thanks for coming in for a couple of minutes. And so we actually got connected a couple of years ago. And so the backstory for Chaz, I believe, and if he wants to add anything to this, is because a couple of years ago we connected because in 2023, right? So he forecasted and predicted all 100 of the House of Delegates seats correctly. And so we chatted then for kind of a story on just sort of the methodology behind this. And, first...
Can we get that one more time? He did what?
So he predicted 100.
Well, also 40 out of 40 in the state Senate.
There you go. So he correctly predicted the entire General Assembly election, right? So I was like, let's talk to this guy. He has roots in Newport News. He's a Virginia Tech alum, as you are, right?
Go Hokies, Chaz. Go Hokies. Love it. You got your maroon on.
Absolutely. That's why I wore it, yeah.
Hey, what an honor to have you here.
But I am
finally
curious,
a fellow Hokie.
I think people should just kind of, I know a little bit of the backstory, but sort of, what got you into, you've been doing this for 8 years, which means you've been 18, 19 years old, started forecasting. So, not a lot of people's dream is to be a political forecaster. So what exactly was the motivation to just kind of be this kind of specific lane of Virginia politics?
So it was 2017. I was a senior in high school that I think I got by that time is when I got into predicting state legislatures. It was August actually before my senior year of high school, because I had seen people doing predictions about the governor race, plenty of people and outlets and organizations, and then I saw a few for lieutenant governor, attorney general. I didn't really see many people doing the House delegate stuff. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. And that year got 96 out of 100. A lot, I think, was the conventional wisdom by political insiders and all that, was Dems would pick up maybe 6 to 8 seats in the House of Delegates. I had them picking up 11. They ended up picking up 15. So underestimated them that year. And then continued it as a hobby through 2019, doing it nationally in 2018. So predicting most state legislative seats, not every single one, but at State Navigate we do predict every single one. And then 2020 started up my own little website, C Analysis, which is kind of like the predecessor for State Navigate. We've moved a bit of its content and code and just kind of methodology over to what we have, but it was just for forecasting. And so I knew that after I would graduate from tech, graduated last year in May 2024, I knew that I wanted to build something that would be a great tool for people all around the country to actually learn about state government, right? because at the end of the day, like right now in state government, data is a privilege. It's a privilege for those who are in power, for them being able to get like internal polls or something, right? So they know how the elections are going to go. We want to change that. It's a privilege in some cases, like, some states are not as open with their state government as others, right? Maybe some are just kind of technologically behind, and that has to do with just like, the kind of revenue they're doing. It's like, okay, how much money we want to put into like the infrastructure for our databases. So what we want to do is make data on state government a right and not a privilege. I think that, there's plenty of tension that goes toward the White House and Congress and everything, right? But, throughout my lifetime, we have seen state house reporters pretty much disappear. That industry is really, it's become a less of a common job. And so, we want to make it so that for those state house reporters, and really for any voter that, is interested in learning about state government, all they can do is just go to our site, put in the state they're interested in, and look through any bit of data that they want.
So you, beyond just forecasting, you're, kind of getting into actual polling itself, right? And so that's kind of a big reason why I wanted to bring you in. You conducted a poll just a couple days ago with some analysis of the statewide races in Virginia, which are becoming for better or for worse, a national storyline in the last couple of weeks. So first I wanted to just kind of, ask you some key takeaways from that polling. You have observations from each of the statewide races. And I'm, Connor, if you have any other questions, but, just kind of general takeaways from the recent polling that you did.
Yeah, so this was our debut statewide poll. We did do a poll actually in a Hampton Roads district in Poquoson and Hampton City, eastern part of Hampton City, and a little bit of York County. So we did that. That poll came out on Tuesday. This statewide poll that we conducted came out on Wednesday. So this poll that we did was conducted by our bipartisan, nonpartisan team at State Navigate on the polling committee. Got to work with my old professor at Virginia Tech, Nick Getter, on this, and some folks who used to be at 538, which I pretty much grew up on, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned that you kind of wanted to be your aspirations were to be like an offshoot of 538, right, or something in that space.
In a little bit in that regard, just like several things to where I think when I was putting together State Navigate during the end of my time in college of like what I wanted for us to be doing. But anyway, so going into our poll, so we asked nearly 700 likely voters in the upcoming election who they planned on voting for. It broke down as 55-42 Spanberger, so a 13-point lead for Abigail Spanberger in the race for governor. And then I believe it was 53-42 in the race for lieutenant governor, where Ghazala Hashmi has an 11-point lead over Republican John Reed. And then the tightest race, of course, the most competitive, is the one for attorney general. Jay Jones only has 50% of the vote, 5-point lead, and Jason Mieres has 45% of the vote. And then in the House of Delegates generic ballot, that broke down as a 53-41 margin for the Democrats, which is a 12-point margin. So we went in the field, and we did things a little bit different compared to a lot of polling right now, because when you're doing a random sample, as any polling outlet does, what you do is, after the fact, you need to weigh it to the actual electorate, right? Like, especially what we have in polling is you're going to get a sample when you're doing random sampling that's wider, that's wealthier, that's more educated, right? That's not what the electorate is actually going to look like. So what we did, and what any polling outlet does, is you weigh based on the demographics such as education, race, age, right, those sort of things, gender. And so what I've seen in polling, a lot of polling thus far, is sometimes they're weighing to the presidential recall. So how people voted in 2024 to match a Harris plus 6 electorate, I think that will backfire, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And even worse, you have some polling outlets like VCU weighing to the 2021 electorate, which is just pretty much polar opposite of what we're probably going to be seeing the electorate this year, because there is a new president in the White House with a new party who is also unpopular, just as Joe Biden was unpopular. The pendulum in what we call in political science thermostatic public opinion, right? So a new president's in the White House, okay. He's a Republican, people are going to move more liberally. Democrat in the White House, people are going to move more conservatively, right? This pretty much always happens. It's happened throughout the history of the country. This is why there's that like midterm effect, right? The pendulum is probably going to be not going to be swinging in favor of the Republicans. It's going to probably hit him in the face this year.
I had an observation. We know that Trump has never really played as a candidate well in Virginia.
Sure.
Right? Do we see Spanberger's lead over Sears from not just your polling, but every polling that we've seen so far this election cycle? Do we attribute that more as a natural byproduct of Trump being in the White House, and so we were naturally going to see this, or is it specific policies that are being enacted that are impacting Virginia, like the federal workforce cuts, impacting a region like Hampton Roads really heavily? I mean, what has more weight, the actual policies in effect from the administration, or just the simple fact that it's a Trump White House and people are going to skew the opposite way?
Let me jump in real quick there, because another factor, he talks about the pendulum effect. We are swinging back from a Youngkin governorship, so that could also play a factor in Spanberger having some pull as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I still do believe, in the classic saying, all politics is local. But at the end of the day, Virginia has elected a governor opposite of the White House in every single gubernatorial election since 1977, with the exception of 2013, when Terry McAuliffe, of course, won that open governor race, as every governor race is open, when Barack Obama was in his second term into the White House. So I think when we talk about the winner, yes, I think that's at the end of the day what's deciding this for governor. But Trump's approval is also underwater. It's at 59% of likely voters this year in our poll disapprove of President Trump. So probably in the 50 on the best possible range, I think, for Republicans, or really for like President Trump, is that he has probably a 55% disapproval rating. So it's somewhere between 55 to 60. But I think that there's a little bit of local politics in play here as well. So 2 years ago, in Prince William County, what they have is the Rural Crescent, a few parts of Northern Virginia that haven't been suburbanized, right? So they have this Rural Crescent, and people were very upset over the local government, which is Democratic controlled, signing off on these data centers. And so as a result, even though compared to 2021, Democrats did pretty well across the Commonwealth, it swung to the left a little bit, not dramatically from 2021. There was still a much closer result than expected in Prince William County. So the governor's been signing off on a lot of these data centers. And it's not just a Nova issue anymore. I'm from Richmond. I grew up in Hanover County, so out in the sticks, just north of Richmond. And they're talking about this new proposal for a data center right on the border of Hanover and Henrico. That's not going to play well. And they're talking about it in Louisa and Goochland. And so that was kind of one of the things at the debate that I think hurt Sears the most. I mean, people talk about, Sears' gaffe with saying being against gay being against gay marriage is not discrimination, and being able to fire people for being gay is not discrimination, right? But I think the biggest thing that actually is going to have an impact on the electorate from that debate, if you were to choose anything, is the moment when they're talking about data centers. Because Spanberger talks about the data centers need to pay their fair share, it's driving up energy costs. Sears really went toward, like the Virginia Clean Economy Act, the VCEA, and didn't really rail against the data centers. If you're railing against the data centers, that's pretty much where public opinion is right now. And so I think that's one thing that is hurting Youngkin's popularity. We've seen his approval rating decline over the last year. And I do think some of that is also related to Trump and who is in the White House. But I think that's something that for people, not a majority of Youngkin voters, but maybe 1% to 2%, or, maybe a little bit more, who are unhappy with his implementation of these data centers, who might be going for a spam burger.
It was staying in that realm very quickly. I think that for a long time, the plan for the Republican ticket has been to push a narrative of more of the same. Do you feel like over the last 6 months to a year, that plan has turned on them a little bit?
Right.
Keep a good thing going.
Keep
right?
a good thing going. That's the
yeah.
slogan. And
Yeah.
now what I will say is that I think it's a good slogan, but maybe not this year, because we've had unemployment rise in Virginia and nationally, right? We didn't really see much job growth, and I believe in the last report that came out a month or so ago, and people are not happy with grocery prices going down. And President Trump promised that grocery prices would go down,
Yep.
And they haven't. So, and this is something that is related to the poll, is that Spamberger's biggest gains, when we ask people how much they make a year in a certain range, so like under 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 90, 100 to 150, and 150K plus, right? So the area, when you're talking about the presidential breakdown of those results, of those income groups that Spamberger is making the largest gains, is with people who are of lower income. It's a 10-point swing from the 2024 presidential vote, just about in our poll, amongst people who make less than $30,000 a year. I think it's only like maybe 2 to 5%, somewhere in that range, for people making 30 to 50. And then for people of higher income, there's pretty much no change.
How much of that do you think is a product of, Spanberger's campaigning has been very focused on affordability, cost of living, right? Whereas, as we had talked about a little bit before,
right.
A lot of Sears's campaign ad focuses on, as other political analysts that we've talked to have stated, it's much more based in culture wars, right, of transgender issues, immigration. Is that what we're seeing play out in real-time polling, do you think, or?
So this is something I do want to talk. The answer is yes. I think that that's something for one of the reasons why Spamberger is performing well with lower income voters. Like the Raging Cajun James Carville said, who worked for Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid, right? That's where that originates. About 30 something, or almost, or I think it's like 35 years ago now, when he came up with that slogan. Now, here's one of the things that's interesting. So we've been tracking the early vote. The early vote is about as blue as it was at this point in 2024. Literally pretty much on the dot. And part of that, even though we're probably going to see a much more friendly Democratic electorate than 2024, given what happens in these gubernatorial years, is because of the delay in satellite location voting in places like Richmond City, Prince William County, Fairfax County. One county that is very critical, that pretty much when it came in last year, we knew that President Trump was going to win not re-election, but that he was going to win the White House, was Loudoun County. So 7:30 p.m. last year, Loudoun County drops all of its votes, and you see this large drop in turnout and a large swing to the right. And it was at that point to where I pretty much knew that President Trump was going to win a non-consecutive term in the White House. Loudoun County has not seen its satellites delayed, unlike Fairfax and unlike Prince William. And yet it is lagging. And I think one of the things to where Sears, I think it's not a good statewide strategy for, her making the transgender stuff, I would say the focal point of her campaign. But one thing one area or one demographic where I think it's having an effect is in Loudoun County with Indian American voters and Muslim voters. They're quite conservative socially. They've been traditionally Democratic. They've really only been Democratic since 2004, particularly with Muslim voters, I should say, have been Democratic since 2004. And I don't think Spamberger's really done a good job with reaching out to that community. She's been really focused on the black vote. I think that was a few months ago a issue for her, right? She's a suburban white woman from Short Pump in Henrico County who worked for the CIA. So not really an appealing profile for being able to get out the black vote, unlike Barack Obama or something like that, right?
Very unconventional Democratic profile, right?
Right.
But you could say that all the kind of seats right now are unique profiles, right? For all of the seats for both sides of the ticket.
Right. But so I think that's where an area, because of the drop in turnout we're seeing in Loudoun County amongst Muslim voters and Indian American voters, it looks like, looking at the predominantly, areas where that is the predominant demographic, I think that's where Sears is making, I guess, gains, because they're probably Democratic leaning anyway, and she's demotivating them to get out.
There, on the other statewide races too, we know that locally, Jay Jones is a former Norfolk delegate, and he has been at the center, in the eye of the storm of controversy for weeks now.
A national topic.
Yes, I mean, no other way to say it, right? Just a national headline that just kind of continues to doesn't seem to go away. Your poll was conducted after those controversies, right? So in theory, people have had the ability to take in that information, to have it affect whether they believe that they would vote for Jones in the upcoming election. Obviously, the lead by Jones over Miyares is much smaller than Spanberger's over Sears, but I know you had alluded to there being, quote, soft support, right, for Jones. I'm hoping you can maybe break down sort of the impact that these controversies have or haven't had on voters so far in Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, there's an 8-point delta between Spanberger's margin and Jones's, right? And so right now it looks like Miyares is getting 7% of Spanberger voters in our poll. Now, here's one of the things that is interesting. Yes, so Jones's support is a lot softer. So there are more people compared to the total amount of people who saying are voting for him, who say they're probably voting for him or leaning voting for him, compared to the percentage of support that Hashmi or Spanberger have. Here's one of the things that's interesting. We asked people in the beginning of our poll, have you already voted? Are you definitely voting? Are you probably voting? Are you probably not voting, or definitely not voting, right? So those are the options in the very first question in the poll to help us build a likely voter model. And so there was a higher concentration amongst people who say they have already voted and are undecided in the attorney general race compared to, the little bit of people who have selected that option for like lieutenant governor or attorney general. So there are probably people who are, I guess, let's say shy Jay Jones voters, right? This is something that we've seen in polling. We call it non-response bias, is that scandal-tarred candidates, T-A-R-R-E-D, tarred and feathered, right, like with a scandal of some sort, whatever capacity it's in, is that you have fewer people saying that they're going to vote for that person in the poll. So that's something that I think is potentially going on here. This was, yes, the second nonpartisan poll that came out since all of the news stories on Jones over the last 2.5 weeks, or really 3 weeks, and so I think Miyares has a path to victory here. What he would need to do is he needs to get more and more of those Spanberger voters, and then he also needs a certain percentage of people who are voting for Spanberger and will just not vote for Attorney General. So if he's getting 7% of Spanberger supporters, Jones up 5, and Spanberger's up 13. Even if the environment is a little bit more Republican, I guess he probably needs to get 8, and then he needs like a 3% or 4% drop off in terms of people who are voting for Spanberger and not voting for the race for Attorney General. That's like rough math. I mean, this is the thing about the last 2 weeks of the campaign, is there are so many moving parts, right? At this time in 2021, a week ago, Glenn Youngkin was not favored in the governor race.
Right.
It was really those last like 2.5 weeks to where he picked up steam. So, and where he eventually became favored. I predicted that Glenn Youngkin would win the governor mansion in 2021. And I think we could see that. I mean, look, if you look at our forecast, we have had Mieres going from a 1 in 10 chance to a 1 in 5 chance of winning the attorney general race. So he's picked up a lot of momentum because of these scandals.
Mm-hmm. Now, first of all, I just want to say how cool it is to sit here while you kind of go through the math in real time, and just how differently you kind of look at these things than most people do when it comes to
math.
Right.
That's why we work in news.
Right, exactly. Right.
No.
We do some English things every once in a while, so it's cool to witness that. There's a couple different places I want to go, but I want to go back to what we talked about when it comes to culture wars and identity politics, and how a lot of times politicians will fall back on that when maybe it seems like what we've learned is that people want to hear about how their bank account is going to change and how their lives are going to change. Do you feel as though, in general, that is an issue, that politicians seem to fall back on this when maybe they should be more focused on the economy, or is that specific to this race?
I think it is very much always the economy. The economy is always at the top of the mind of voters. There's a CNU poll that came out in September that showed the economy is the most important. It always is the most important. This is kind of a thing when we talk about survey design, is that if you only give people one option, they're going to choose more of the like economy-based issues. We're going to do another statewide poll starting on Sunday, and we're going to ask people what are their top 3 issues. I think that the transgender policies issue is not really as prominent as it was in 2021, besides maybe Loudon. I think Loudon was the face of that in 2021, and maybe that could also be a reason, an adjunct to those negative ads that Sears has been running against Spanberger on transgender policies, for why Loudoun County turnout is pretty meager. But I think at the end of the day, people are looking at pocketbooks, people are looking at rising electricity bills, and they look at who's in the governor's mansion and who's in the White House. And for those lower income voters, they feel like they got to go the other way. That's what it looks like in our poll.
So when you're analyzing campaign narratives, knowing what your answer was to that question, you say you want to make data a right, but as of now, data still remains a privilege for the most part. It's a privilege that these campaigns have internally. Mm-hmm. And so they likely are at least somewhat aware of what we're talking about when it comes to this particular topic, and that the economy is what people want to hear about first and foremost. So when you see a candidate fall back on maybe some of those identity politics or culture war issues, do you start to think, well, maybe they know they can't win on economy? And so that, because it's likely they understand what we're talking about.
Sure. I think another reason why Sears is talking about the transgender question is that she needs to get out her base. She's not going to win on persuasion. Spanberger's going to do better on persuasion. When we talk about persuasion, I mean like independent voters and swing voters. Spanberger's going to win those by a considerable margin. So the Republican strategy, I think, this year is just, let's get out the people who we know are going to vote for us. Let's get them angry. Let's get them motivated. Anger is a great motivator in any aspect of life, but even voting. Whether it be on the Democratic side, who are angry about President Trump, or whether it be on the Republican side, who are angry about the transgender issue and Spanberger's stances on it. I think that's a reason why Sears has made that a focal point of her campaign, is to get the base energized and moved out, especially when President Trump is not campaigning here, to get especially the Republican voters who do not have a college education, who are less likely to turn out, to be able to get them out. Yeah.
We were at the gubernatorial debate. I'm sure you watched it. Media spin room was not a classic media spin room in which the candidates didn't actually come out to said spin room. It was for Spanberger, it was Don Scott, House Speaker, and it was one of Sears' strategists that came out to talk to the media, right? So being in the media spin room for the gubernatorial debate was pretty uneventful, actually. We were basically just watching the debate on a screen in a room. So, but what I thought was interesting that night, that I want to kind of pick your brain on, is we asked, the Sears strategist just a couple questions about how they thought the debate won, and verbatim, that strategist said this race is about Jay Jones, right? And so he alluded to the fact that the first 12-15 minutes of the gubernatorial debate was spent on the Jay Jones text controversy. Mm-hmm. But repeatedly, same strategist kept saying what you're going to see from this campaign is Jay Jones, essentially. Good or bad strategy to basically say that our statewide candidate running for the highest seat in Virginia, our campaign is about the opponent's other running mate. Do you think that is a prudent strategy, or do we think that it is simply a product of them trying to get as much as they can with the issue?
If it was a winning strategy, then Spanberger would be doing as poorly in the polls as Jay Jones is, right? I've never seen it work where people say, well, what about this other person who's either on the ticket or like nearby, right? Like, I mean, there was this scandal-charged House of Delegates candidate in Henrico County in 2023, and there was a nearby adjacent House of Delegates district, and Republicans tried to, tie this Democratic candidate to that Democratic candidate. It didn't work. That Democratic candidate who didn't have a scandal, who Republicans were trying to link to that other Democratic candidate, won by 8 or 9%. I think it's the only option they have because they just want to try. And this is kind of one of the things that is interesting in the divergence between each statewide campaign. Is that's what Sears' campaign is doing, right? Is look, Jay Jones or Spanberger's with Jay Jones, Spanberger's with Jay Jones. Mieres is saying, look, Spanberger's not endorsing Jay Jones. You can vote for me, pretty much, is the centerpiece of his ad because he knows he needs Spanberger voters. And it's the same thing with Rhiel. In Rhiel's ads, it's let's put a check on Richmond, right? So they know that Abigail Spanberger is going to be the next governor of Virginia. You can bet the farm on that. I mean, the only way for Spanberger to not become governor is if there is an electorate as blue as as red as 2024, as some polling is doing, or some polling, again, like VCU, is polling or weighing their electorate to 2021 when Biden's in the White House. If you think that the electorate is going to be as red as 2021 or even 2024, I have a great forever home on Tangier Island to sell you.
Part of this whole conversation, though, right, is this idea that voters, specifically in midterm elections, don't turn out the way that they do in general elections, right? And so we, being in news, being in forecasting, we are so hyper-focused on, the text message controversy and all the layers of complications that is for Jay Jones. But, we've heard from a lot of, different political analysts, and it's just kind of common knowledge that a lot of voters simply don't pay attention as much as we do because it's our job to focus on that. So do you think, just based on the idea that Spanberger's at the top of the ticket, that's going to be enough to carry Hashmi and Jones across the finish line to Dems winning all statewide races? Or do we think that people are actually investing enough knowledge and research to make independent decisions about specific races?
Yeah, look, it's been 20 years since we had a split result in the races between governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. In 2005, Tim Kaine was elected governor, and in the race for lieutenant governor, Bill Bolling was elected. He's a Republican. And then in the very narrow race for attorney general, Bob McDonnell was elected. He would later become governor in 2009. So it's been 20 years. But you have to think about, and there's maybe an 8% difference between the best Democratic performance and best Republican performance that year. Maybe a little bit less. I think it might have even been 6. But you have to think about what, having a reason to split your ticket, right? This is what we saw in 2013. There was an 11-point difference between the races for lieutenant governor and attorney general, where there was a very weak candidate for lieutenant governor when Ralph Northam, Democrat, was running. He won by about 11 points. And Democrat Mark Herring won his first term as attorney general, which was an open race, by a gnat's eyebrow. It went to a recount and everything. So I think that you're going to see more ticket splitting, probably the most ticket splitting since 2013. Can it be 11% as it was that year? Maybe. In the margin. If there is that drop off from Spanberger voters who do not vote in the attorney general race, I would be a little surprised if Mieres was able to get 11% of Spanberger voters. I think that's a little high. But yeah, so I mean, I think that at the end of the day, obviously the larger Spanberger wins, more complicated it's going to be for Mieres to win. So you've got some polls that have her up, even in like the VCU poll, which had it like a 2021 electorate, which again was like a very Republican friendly electorate, has Spanberger up 7. Spanberger is probably going to win this thing by like low double digits. I would say her ultimate floor in the governor race is 8 points. And if that is happening, then Mieres definitely has a path. If he's getting 7% and he only needs like a 1 or 2% drop off for people who are voting for Spanberger to just not vote in the race for attorney general, then yeah. So that's pretty much best case scenario, I think, for Republicans, is that Spanberger plus 8. There's a non-zero chance that it could be as high as like Spanberger by 18, 19, something like that. That's not what we have. Our forecast has Spanberger up by 11. Our poll had her up 13. There was a Washington Post Shar School poll at GMU that came up that had Spanberger plus 12. So I think that's probably like in the 10 to 15 point range, are kind of the most likely range if I had to narrow it down.
Yeah.
But
you talk about these different polls, right? And I do want to mention that I'm going to be using Nat's eyebrow in the future. Okay, to describe small margins, that will be my go-to from here on out.
I got it from
Nat's eyebrow.
I got it from there was I don't know, I was watching like some documentary, and it was this Southern Democratic senator it was about Kennedy.
Yeah.
And it was a Southern Democratic senator who was like anti-civil rights, and he was saying, well, Kennedy doesn't have a mandate. He was elected by Nat's eyebrow.
By Nat's eyebrow.
So I've actually never heard that.
Yeah,
so
that's been in my lexicon ever since.
One could say the Knicks were a Nat's eyebrow from beating the Pacers last year. Okay, let's get back to the politics. Let's get
Virginia politics to Indiana Pacers.
I'll always find a way. Okay. I'll always find a way. Now, I want to get back to the politics. I want to talk about polling itself, what you do, the practice of what you do. By my memory, in 2016 is a demarcation point for me where a lot of eyes were turned to polling because so many polls were so wrong about that presidential election. I'm wondering, and you said you started a little bit after that, but from your perspective, has polling improved over the course of the last decade or so? Are we getting to a point, I know you're doing your part, but in general, do you feel like it's becoming a more trustworthy practice?
Yeah, look, I think Trump has really upset the polling industry, right? And people talk about like 2016 was the big year where polling was off. Not so much nationally though, because I think polling had Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote by 2 or 3%. She won it by about 2%. But it was those swing states in the Midwest with a large non-college white population that missed. And so ever since then, polling has started to weigh their respondents by education to make sure that you don't have a sample that is too educated, because that's starting to become more and more of a Democratic-leaning demographic. 2020 was the worst year in polling since the 1980s, and that was pretty much because of COVID. You had Republicans going out and about who didn't care about the lockdowns, right? No, I'm not staying in my house, no mask. Yeah. Democrats were pretty much obeying the lockdowns, and were like, oh, poll, I can answer this. I'm not doing anything right now. I'm on lockdown, right? So that was why there was that big difference. Polling in 2022 was pretty good. It underestimated the Democrats by a little bit. And then 2024 is about the same, but it underestimated the Republicans a little bit, maybe by like a point or two. But that's all within the margin of error, right? I mean, unless you're doing a poll where, you're getting like thousands and thousands of respondents, right? So you can shrink that margin of error. You're going to have like a margin of error of like our poll's margin of error is like 3.4%. So you subtract that, and you could have maybe Spanberger winning by like 9 something, right? High, like almost 10%. Or she could win by, again, that larger side of her ceiling, add that margin of error, and it's like, what, Spanberger plus 16, something like that. So, I think that, I've been looking at polls for 8 years now, and I think that the industry has learned lessons like it did in 2016, and I think that in 2024, the big thing that helped polling, like the more accurate pollsters weighted by the 2020 recall, like who did you vote for in 2020, right? That was very popular, and it worked. And that was because of political science that showed that it was going to produce a more accurate result. I don't think it's a sound practice when public opinion has moved so far leftward compared to last year, right? When, like, for example, Gallup does these quarterly reports for how people identify. Do you identify as a Democrat or a Republican or independent? And obviously it's going to split about 3 ways, independent's getting like 40-something% in that first time. And then when you push and ask, like, okay, for those independents, which party do you think you generally lean toward, right? So those are the 2 questions in what Gallup asked. Right before the 2024 election, it was R plus 1. It's now D plus 7, which is huge. That's a little bit better than I think it was actually at this point in 2017. I think that trying to get a result where you weigh your poll to make sure that, okay, it's only a Harris plus 6 electorate, I think is a mistake. But we will see how that shapes out.
And still a lot to shape out, as you've heard from Chaz in these races in general, not just looking at who wins, but the margins by which they win. And all right, last question before we get you out of here. First of all, for those of us who grew up on Grantland, 538, kind of a cousin to Grantland.com, so we appreciate the shout out to the Bill Simmons universe. Last question for you. Is polling an art or a science?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of opinion as well. I mean, look, at the end of the day, there are decisions made by humans going into the polling, right? There is a human decision to weigh your poll to 2021 like VCU had. There's a decision to weigh to 2024. We had our poll go between 2017 and 2021 with those exit polls to look at the demographics and everything. I also think forecasting is a little bit of the same way. I feel like in a lot of my trade, not just forecasting and polling, but just even State Navigate in general, in how we built the website and organization, I asked my friends back at Tech, like, okay, these are the names I'm thinking of for this new organization I'm coming up with. What do you like? One of them was like, what, plural states or something. So people like State Navigate. And I was like, okay, I thought that's the best one too. And then I would draw like designs for the pages, like just like with a pencil and everything, and show it to our team. And it's like, I think we should design the pages like this, right? And so the team and I have worked together on like how are we getting the information to where it's going to be the most digestible for people, right? Whether it be the news, or whether it be the district data, or whether it be the campaign finance, or any kind of data we have. That is definitely what has felt like an art as I've worked at State Navigate. Wow. I think it is the same with designing a forecast, is what you decide to put into your forecast. How much do you weigh polling? How much do you weigh the previous results? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. So I think a lot of what I guess I do is not just political science and science, but in a way, art. And I think a lot of our team feels the same way.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Love to hear it. Speaking of art, Nia Campbell has been blessing us with video. She's been showcasing the website. Nia, do you have any questions for Chaz before we get out of here? Anything you'd like to add?
No questions. You are a wealth of knowledge.
Yes,
I appreciate
most
it.
definitely. Alex, do you have anything else before we get out of here?
No.
All right.
I'm good.
Awesome, Chaz. You're the best. We appreciate you giving us all the time that we could ask for here. And we know you've got a lot going on both today and in the coming weeks. So good luck with your picks this year. And I'm sure we look forward to hearing
Where
from
will
you
you be
again.
election night? What's the
Oh, yes, this is something your audience will want to know.
Okay.
So we have a feature on election night to where you will want to be coming to our website. We call it the navcast. So we look at the actual results as they come in down to the precinct level, and for these absentees, for early in person and everything, and we calculate based on those previous results, and we figure out what are the live odds of, based on those results only, that someone is going to win each House of Delegates seat, each statewide race, and what is the projected margin. We're going to be calling the races, and I feel confident that we are going to be beating every other organization to the punch on being able to call the races quickly and safely. We were the first organization to call the Attorney General race and Lieutenant Governor race in those primaries earlier in the year. So this is our forte. It's going to be great. You can see the results of, by district, by county, by precinct, for every single candidate. So go to statenavigate.org and go to Virginia, and you can go to something that will pop up there on the homepage that will say State Navigate Navcast.
Navcast.
For election night.
Okay, got it. Chaz, we appreciate it so much. You heard it here first. The Navcast, you can have that on your computer. You can have 13 News Now on your TV. We've got you all set for Election Day here in Virginia. Thank you so much, Chaz, for coming in. Go Hokies.
Go Hokies. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, awesome. And hopefully we'll see Chaz again down the road as well.